everyone. Please be welcome to this panel discussion that we have titled Unity and Diversity, Exploring the Multifaceted Latin American Latinx Experiences within Lagos Community. Lagos, as most of you know, is the Latin American Graduate Organization of Students at Pitt. And our idea with this panel is to have the possibility of creating a space for showing and presenting the outstanding careers of the members of our community, careers as workers, scholars, community organizers, leaders, artists. We all think that these careers, but also our research topics in different disciplines and different areas of knowledge are very relevant for our region and in general for the Latinx experiences and identities. And this is the possibility of having this transdisciplinary conversation about that. And it's also a chance for us as graduate students to have experience and gain experience in presenting our research, in presenting our topics. So it's interesting for that too. So please be very welcome. Our method will be, we have 10 minutes short presentations of our panelists in order, and then at the end, we will have a small space for questions and answers for the different panelists. So in that moment, please feel free to make your questions, whether using your microphone or in the chat. So let's start with Tania. Tania, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Iris, for the introduction. I am sociologist. I am now studying the second year of the program in sociology at Pitt. And my current research interests encompass political sociology, social movements, and environmental politics. And I'm going to present a research that is a work in progress about the relationship between social movement and media. Next slide, please. My first phase of this research was to describe how mainstream media portray social movement actions, social movement participants, their claims, who is responsible for violence, especially in a country such as Peru with recent use of disproportional force by military and police forces, and which are the costs that are most highlighted in the context of a cycle of protest. I did this by analyzing an original database of the headlines by 6 newspapers that are based in the capital city. I include my abstract, and I also can share the result of this first phase, which was recently published in a journal, in a Peruvian journal that is called Discursos del Sur, Discourse from the South. So this was for me a way to represent how, for example, vandals was the most mentioned word to refer to people who participated in protests. State repression was concealed by these newspapers that are actually just owned by 2 corporations, because it's a highly concentrated market. So my point was also to contribute to the debate about the political consequence of a market that is highly concentrated for pluralism, but also for the demonization and the legitimation of social dissent. Next slide, please. I am currently working on the second phase of this project, that is more interested in what is happening outside the mainstream media. And that is what I'm calling situated journalism. Situated journalism is a type of journalism that doesn't rely on connections with corporations that are very powerful, but with the ongoing process of negotiation to get access, to get rapport with people on the ground that are participated in the grassroots movements. So my main question is, what factors facilitate or hinder the practice of situated journalism in the context of the recent Peruvian authoritarian term? And my two specific questions are, how do local journalists in Puno, that was the locus of many protests in the years by the end of the 2022 and the start of 2023, navigate their relationships with protesters during periods of social unrest? And my second specific question is, what strategies do they employ to provide coverage in an environment with all the media organizations are affected by increased discredit in the eyes of the citizens? So those are my questions. And now I've completed 2 exploratory fieldworks. I could achieve like approximately 21, 22 interviews with local journalists, and also did observation work. If, for example, in one of these photographs, you see people who participated in protests pointed to the bullets that were shooted directly to the houses of people in the localities affected by state repression, and many journalists like taking photos, but I noticed the absence of journalists from Lima-based media outlets. In the other, you see a journalist that is covering a commemoration act of one of these protests that lead to the death of many people. When talking about the repercussions for Latin America, I think that I would love to do comparative work about, because I am pretty sure that Peru is not the only case of a highly concentrated media market that have repercussions in whose voices are heard, whose voices matter, and how even repression can be concealed or even justified. So I think that when we are, and even here, when there are many debates and controversies about free speech, for example, in the wake of the pro-Palestinian social movements, I think that this is a work that can connect with many areas, not only in Latin America, but also in our broader debates on what democracy is about. Thank you.
Thank you, Tania. So we are moving to Abby.
Thank you, Tania. That was very insightful. And thank you, Edis, for the transition. So my name is Abby Bonilla, and I am a dual MBA, MSW student here at Pitt, almost done. I have 17 years of community-centered work and nonprofit work. And so I think that definitely informs a lot of the research that I'm currently doing in my program. Between the two programs, my interests lie in corporate social responsibility, environmental social governance, or social impact are also connected to that, which is the ESG and SI, and then disaster services, housing, and policy. We go to the next slide. I will focus on equitable disaster recovery. I first became connected to this issue once I graduated from undergrad, and I joined where I happened to someone's home to be destroyed. And in Detroit, this was in Detroit, Michigan, where I used to live, the #1 form of disaster that was regularly occurring were home fires. And that is in part due to old infrastructure and a alarmingly high rate of arson. And this is falling close behind New York City and Chicago and the number of fires that were occurring in Detroit at this time. So I participated with organizations or a group to respond to home fires and provide assistance to families, and did casework with families, and also had the opportunity to work on the other end of disaster cycle services and do preparedness campaigns as well with in educational spaces, in community spaces, and led our initial launch for a region-wide home fire campaign, where we emphasized really helping people to establish a fire safety plan for their home and installing smoke detectors throughout the Metro Detroit area. I then moved to All Hands and Hearts, where I did volunteer work within places that had been affected by hurricanes specifically, or earthquakes. So there was some work done in the USVI, in Puerto Rico, in different parts of the US. And I also had the opportunity to work with the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. So there was a lot of on the ground information that is informing the work that I'm doing now. There are multiple players in this space. There's nonprofits, philanthropies, and foundations, and there's also federal resources such as FEMA, HUD, and the SBA. That's the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the the Department for Housing and Urban Development, and the Small Business Association. Some of the research methods that I have utilized include the community work that I've done, interviews, online calls, such as working groups or Zoom webinars, a lot of literature reviews, and that's not all inclusive, but other methods as well. And I will say specifically one thing that had close, in addition to the experience I had on the ground, was when Hurricanes Irma and Maria occurred in September of 2017 in Puerto Rico. There were 77,000 rejected FEMA applications, and a large portion of this was connected to improper proof or insufficient proof of ownership of homes. And this not only affects Puerto Ricans, but it also affects in different parts of the mainland US, where there are higher populations of Black American communities and lower income communities, where there is land that has been passed down from generations, but maybe there's not a proper title that is available and that is required for accessing federal funding. So we can go to the next slide. A lot of my research focuses at the federal level now. And so I do a lot of policy analysis and looking at bills that are introduced, and also at implementation of some policy as well. And I will say that last year alone, there were 114 federally declared disasters. And that's according to FEMA. That's only the disasters that have been declared at a federal level. So those are the only disasters that are eligible to receive services. Disasters disproportionately affect low income and small communities. It's critical that we expand the accessibility to these services as well. The impacts of disaster are compounded within communities of color and low income households. And there's been and for there's inequities of disaster aid. That could also look like extended wait times for a federal disaster declaration or appropriation or distribution at the federal level. It could look like a lack of access to multilingual materials. It could look like hours-long wait times. If there is no electricity anywhere and you have to wait for hours on a call to try to get your case in, that's delays, and you may not have space to recharge your phone. So that's one practical issue that's come up, and a duplication of benefits as well. So I will just briefly mention two acts that are currently on the floor in Congress right now. That's the Housing Survivors of Major Disasters Act, and that's HR 5324. There's been previous iterations of this in 2019, 2020, 2021. This is 2023. This was introduced. And the elimination is essentially, or the focus is the elimination of barriers to federal disaster assistance, but through the expansion of acceptable forms of proof of home ownership, particularly with FEMA. And in September 2021, FEMA expanded what they were accepting, but this was just at a departmental level. And so this push for this bill would permanentize that and put it into law, since FEMA is a federal organization. Federal agency, excuse me. The other bill that's currently on the floor is the Reforming Disaster Recovery Act. This is in the Senate, and it's Senate Bill 1686. And this focuses on HUD, and that is the Department of Urban and Housing Development. They have a disaster recovery branch that they've been receiving federal funding for since the 90s. And it was only just last year that they decided to launch a specific branch focused on disaster recovery, and this initiative or this bill would permanentize funding for that branch, and they meet unmet needs. There's also a number of coalitions and organizations that are advocating and lobbying for support of this. I personally am connected to the National Low Income Housing Coalition. I attend their disaster recovery working group, and that is another space that just informs the research that I'm doing. And I mean, the goal is essentially just pushing for, advocating for expanded equitable disaster recovery. And I have really enjoyed being able to do this at a policy level, coming from the ground and seeing the impact and being able to learn the language of what does it look like and how do you advocate and how do you lobby at the policy federal level. And that's everything. Thank you.
Amazing, Abby. Thank you so much. Now we go with Guilherme.
Hello. So my name is Guilherme. I come from Brazil. I'm a artist, researcher. I have a bachelor in performing arts. My concentration was theater directing, and my artistic and pedagogical focuses are experimentalism, devised theater, non-dramatic theater, and pushing the boundaries of theater towards dance, visual arts, and even architecture. Like, how does the space as a language inform our movements and our feelings, be it in artistic situations or in our daily life? I'm highly influenced by a Bauhaus artist teacher called Oscar Schlemmer. And in 2015, I got in touch with an improvisation technique called viewpoints. This technique was developed by the dancer Mary Overly in the context of postmodern dance in New York in the 70s and 80s, and then continued to be developed in the theater group called City Company, also in New York, with whom I did a workshop in 2019. My master's research was located in the crossroads of theater and the visual arts, focused on the Brazilian artist called Laura Vinci. I also have a teaching experience mainly in middle and high school. I started directing a theater project at a school in São Paulo in 2003, and then I started teaching in 2009. And since 2018, I also taught young professional actors in training in a conservatory in São Paulo. I am a first year PhD student. So this is very new to me. My program is theater and performance studies. So it's kind of a dual project. In the theater field, I'm focused on improvisation and movement. And in the performance studies field, which is different, I'm interested in the relationship between the queer body and urban landscape. Performance studies, for those who don't know what it is a very broad interdisciplinary field that was created in the 1970s, mainly through the approximation of theater and anthropology, but it's very interdisciplinary. Richard Schechner, a scholar from NYU and the precursor of the field, explains that not everything is performance, although most things can be studied as performance. We can go to the next slide, please. So in the performance, I'm going to share with you one project, one research project that I plan to start this next summer. So this is all in the paper, in the ideas, and I still didn't started practicing it. And I'm going to share it with you. So this is brand new. The name is Queer Choreopolitics in Downtown São Paulo. I started to think about the movement, the choreographies of queer bodies in downtown São Paulo, an area that concentrates many queer venues and spaces, and that therefore concentrates queer people. I have questions such as, can we talk about downtown São Paulo as a queer safe space, or even as a queer space? What specific features of urban spaces influence the performative qualities, movement, coded choreographies, and embodied experiences, sensations, feelings of queer individuals in downtown São Paulo? Why do certain urban spaces create feelings of insecurity or joy, lightness or pressure? And how does this relate to local history and culture and to the urbanization processes? And how can we reflect on this subject that inhabits and establishes social exchanges in this area from a gender and sexuality perspective? I am intrigued by the role some socially and culturally effervescent spaces play in supporting the resistance of marginalized communities, which can be perceived, for example, in the hordes of young queer people who gather in the venues and also on the streets in downtown to interact, drink, dance, and flirt. So in the map, you can see I've highlighted some areas in pink. This is downtown São Paulo. And I've highlighted, for example, Praça da República, which gathers a lot of gay porn cinemas. I gathered Largo do Arouche, which is the main gay area of São Paulo with a bunch of gay bars. Also Chile, which is a gay sauna. And then we have Praça Roosevelt with many alternative theaters and also a bunch of people drinking and gathering in the streets. And Parque Augusta, which is a brand new park, which opened in 2021. And since day one is considered a queer space. Why? I mean, and how are all these spaces connected? And how are the choreographies like happened between the spaces? To assist me in this research, I invoked the concept of choreopolitics of the Brazilian researcher at NYU, André Lepecki. He draws this concept from Hannah Arendt's concept of politics, a general orientation towards freedom. Orientation as sense that can mean the signification, semantic, and also direction, therefore movement, kinetic. That is the meaning of politics, which is also its aim or direction is freedom. On the other hand, choreopolice stands for the police, like agents, as the movement controller in a city, controlling our behavior in public. But we also have an introjected police, a self-policing, policing ourselves, something that Deleuze diagnosed as the control societies. The police control the choreographies in public space, the circulatory organization of the polis. On the other hand, opposing to this, we have choreopolitics. Choreopolitics requires a redistribution and reinvention of bodies, affects, and senses through which one may learn how to move politically, how to invest, activate, seek, or experiment with a movement whose only sense, meaning, or direction is the experimental exercise of freedom. And I would like to stress the expression experimental exercise. Well, in my view, queer existence in itself is or can still be said to be experimental, as it struggles daily to build an existence that goes against the grain of compulsory cis heterosexuality. As for my methodology, I intend to conduct an autoethnography, my own observation and participation in such choreopolitics, and an ethnography focusing on the people that frequent the Augusta Park. And now we can go to the next slide, please. In terms of community connection, First of all, I believe that by shedding light on the experiences of a marginalized population, this research will contribute to a broader discourse on inclusivity and will also challenge the systemic discrimination and violence faced by queer individuals in Brazil. This is what I believe, right? How useful can this research be? I intend to participate and collaborate in more accessible media, such as magazines and podcasts, in order to make this academic research to be accessible and to dialogue with people outside academia. And I also intend to promote talks with the community through non-governmental organizations and community centers. And talks as dialogues, not me like making lectures for people to listen, but mainly for me to listen what they have to say about their living experiences in São Paulo. I strongly believe that increasing visibility of queer existence and queer struggles towards freedom, that is queer choreopolitics, is a powerful tool that pushes for more public policies and also towards acceptance and respect. After this first stage of my research in my hometown, São Paulo, my future research goals are to expand this to other Latin American countries in order to be able to compare different manifestations of freedom, queer choreopolitics in everyday life in cities. Also, to shed light on good public policies and join the efforts of the struggle for a queer existence with respect and dignity and full access to citizenship and experience of urban spaces. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you so much, Guy. Now we're moving to Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you so much, because I found a lot of connections just by listening to you, Guy, really. I'm Jennifer, from Lima, Peru. I always said that I grew up in San Juan del Lurigancho, which is a place, an urban peripheral place in Lima, the capital, that has more than 1 million people living there. So yeah, and I always want to start with my positionality regarding the type of research that I try to conduct, because I think it is really important to say it and to share. I'm a Peruvian community organizer. I study a bachelor degree in political science, and then thanks to Fulbright, I came here to the States to study my master's degree in education, social and comparative analysis in education. I am a current activist, even though I'm here and continue working with two organizations, local organizations, SJL en Acción and Ni Una Menos Somos Todas, San Juan del Lurigancho. And in terms of the research, it's very interdisciplinary, but I try to connect all the topics regarding democracy, participation, local identity, education for citizenship, or ecological citizenship as well. So you can pass the next one. Thank you. In terms of the research or different types of research that I have been developing during my PhD here in the University of Pittsburgh, I can say that I tag this to my local community in San Juan del Lurigancho. So one of the first things that I did is this. I'm going to read the title, is Roots and Local Identity, Belonging, Periphery, and Street Smarts of Local Leaders from San Juan del Lurigancho. And as for the questions that I have for this research that is a work in progress still, and is going to be part of my milestone 2 for my PhD, is how we can understand, or how local leaders or local community organizers in San Juan del Lurigancho define their identity to San Juan del Lurigancho. What are the elements that they have in terms of saying, oh, I belong to this place, I love this territory, and especially because they participate in artistic and cultural organizations, how their participation inform or shape the way in they define this local identity or connection to San Juan de Lurigancho as well. And at the same time, how they envision this for future generations, how the seeds of loving this place, San Juan de Lurigancho, could be part of an educational system at the local level or not. So that is part of this work in progress that I already present also in a conference. Another research that is connected to my connection to San Juan de Lurigancho, it's something that I did recently as well with a group of my neighbors, specifically in my barrio, Asentamiento Humano Simón Bolívar, because it was connected to this defending or this act of defending green areas in, as you can see in the picture, that is part of my neighborhood. I live there. This is in the hillside in San Juan de Lurigancho. And there is a picture of the areas that we recover. And I say we because when I'm doing this kind of research, sometimes it's difficult to separate myself and see what I'm doing as an object. I never see this, at least for me, because I came from these places. My second thing is being a researcher. It's not the first thing. I'm a community organizer first. I'm a neighbor first. And then I'm a scholar or I'm a researcher. Or, well, that's something that I'm still developing in terms of the connections to doing research. But I just finished this article that is also published in a journal. It's in Spanish. It's my first step of the interviews that I did to my 10 neighbors in terms of their stories of life and how they defend the green areas in this place, and how was the connection with their previous connection in their previous areas, because all of them, or the majority of them, speak Quechua, which is an indigenous language, and at the same time they transform. And there is a work in Spanish that is reterritorializar, which means to have a new connection with the territory, even though it's different from your previous territory when you grew up. It is important to recognize how they are still like fighting against trafficking land, against different things, or not having access into local public policy. So something that I put here in Spanish is los procesos de territorialidad de la población son el germen de las políticas públicas, which means like what is happening locally can inform and must inform public policies. The next one, please. So finally, in terms of the connection with Latin American countries or this research in Latin America and comparative studies, as for my dissertation or towards dissertation, I have this also, which is research that I started last summer. It's regarding museums, community, and resistance. And as I said, I'm very connected to my place, to my neighborhood. And I had the opportunity to travel to Brazil last summer, and I went to Belo Horizonte. And as you can see, the two pictures in Peru and in Brazil, you can see probably is the same place, but no, those are different places. Those are located in the periphery of each city. There are a lot of situations regarding stigmatization, discrimination, racism. So in those places, I just look for two peripheral sites, community-based museums, not the typical museums that we know with big infrastructure or with big budget. So I I look for those specific places, community-based museums, one that is the Mukifu in Belo Horizonte, that works with the stories of the local community people, especially 14 Black women from the Morro de Papagayo, Belo Horizonte, and a community-based museum or school museum within the school in San Juan del Lurigancho en el San José Obrero School. So, yeah, non-colonial museums, yes, that's what it's a work in progress. I have 14 interviews with this, and yeah, just like connecting things about memory, local identity, and place-based narratives to, again, change the stigmatization, to go against racism, go against discrimination, and again, yeah, see the local context, see the seeds that are happening locally to inform policy, to inform what is happening also around the world. So that's what I have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jen. Amazing work. Now we go to Paola.
Hi, everyone. Oh, can you hear me? Yeah, something happened. So great. So I am glad to participate in this space with the Latino community and to have the opportunity to share a bit about my research and talk with my colleagues and to see like how it could like impact our community. So I am from Bogota, Colombia, and I am currently in my second year of PhD in rehabilitation science. My background is in occupational therapy from the Universidad Nacional de Colombia, and I have a master's degree in rehabilitation science from the University of Alberta, that is in Canada. My research focus from my undergraduate to the present has been assistive technology. So what is assistive technology? Some of you may be wondering. So it means any device, any product, any software that is used with people with disabilities to improve or maintain their functionality and independence. So for example, a wheelchair, a cochlear implant, and screen software, and screen reading software, and so on. So in the last decade, I have worked on assistive technology for children with disabilities to make them more independent when they play and also in education. And during my PhD, I have changed the focus in terms of the population I'm working with. And now I am focusing on adults with physical disabilities or low vision or blindness. Also, I am focusing on the use of smart home technology, specifically smart speakers. So this leads to the work I am doing during my PhD. Next slide, please. So for sure, many of you are using a smart speaker in your home. It can be like Alexa, Google, or Siri. And you will have discovered like a lot of advantages and a lot of benefits of using these devices, but also a couple of shortcomings or things that we still don't understand, like how to do on these devices, how to control these devices. So in recent years, smart speakers have been used in the field of rehabilitation to support the independence of people with disabilities in their homes. These devices can help with a lot of things like communication, entertainment, like to control several smart home appliances, to turn on the lights, to open the doors, etc. So these devices are not yet well known in the disability community. So it's usually healthcare professionals, clinicians, like occupational therapists, who prescribe and train their patients on how to use this technology. Or it's the people with disabilities that have more technical knowledge, that they have more technology literacy, the users of these devices. So we think that because of the positive impact that the smart speakers can have on the life of people with disabilities, we think that more and more people should adopt these devices in their daily lives. And one way to achieve this is through the dissemination of knowledge. So we are working, like my team and I, we're working on creating a smart speaker online training program on the use of smart speakers that is focused on the disability community. Although in reality, anyone can use this training program. So this program contains a lot of things like tips, some videos, graphics, music. It's very interactive. And we give like from basic information about, for example, how to set up a smart speaker to more advanced information. So with this training program, we want people with disabilities to learn like how to use their smart speakers to his full potential so they can improve their independence. And we also want it to be a tool for caregivers so they can pass some other tasks to the device, like reading a book, making a shopping list, or making or buying something on Amazon, for instance. All of this can be done by the smart speaker, and then we can reduce the burden on the caregiver. We also want like the smart speaker to be, the training program to be a tool for clinicians. So the clinicians can include these devices and this program in their intervention, and they can have a tool to teach like patients how to use the smart speaker. So yeah, basically that is like I'm working on my PhD. This is a work in progress. We are in the initial phase, and this is a little bit of background of what I am doing. Next. So now I want to share a little bit about my area, which is assistive technology, and what is the situation in Latin America, specifically in Colombia. So a lot of my experience with assistive technology has been abroad, in Canada, in Italy, and now here in the United States. So I don't have much experience in Colombia, which is a shame, but this has allowed me to observe from the outside how the current situation is and compare it with other countries, as I can see like points of improvement and points where we are working well. So I'm gonna give you a very broad outline, a very general idea of some of the problems that are right now in Colombia in terms of the provision of assistive technology. So first, we found that the cost of some of this technology is expensive, is very high. And many times, I mean, not all the times, but many times it's not covered by the healthcare system. So the money has to come out of people's pockets, which means that many people don't have access to assistive technology that will be like suitable for them because they cannot afford these products. Another issue is that there are not enough clinicians or qualified personnel to prescribe assistive technology and to train patients in how to use these products. So there is a lack of knowledge on the part of healthcare professionals about what kind of technology currently exists that can help their patients. And finally, priority is given to vulnerable populations, such as the youngest, the oldest, the poorest, to have access to assistive technology. But like, what about the rest of the population? So these people have a minimal chance of accessing assistive technology, which further like increments this problematic in Colombia. So these problems maybe can be transferred to other countries in Latin America, but the reality is that there is very little research and very little is known about the current situation of people with disabilities to access assistive technology. So it's very difficult to create a plan, to have an action plan, and to be able to add from public health and policies to create this like a positive change in this situation, like in the provision of assistive technology. So there is still a long way to go in Latin America about the rise of people with disabilities. Well, I hope that in the future I can be like part of this change. I can be part of this action, and I can be like a leader in creating like a change and advocate for people with disabilities and the right. I mean, the right to live independently and to have an active participation thanks to assistive technology. Thank you very much for listening.
Certainly you will, Pao. Thank you so much. Finally, I will go to close our panel. So my name is Iris Medellin Perez. I am from Colombia too. I am a historian. I did my BA in history in the Universidad del Rosario, and then I did my MA in sociology in Universidad de los Andes. And as Jennifer, I like to say that I also come from an urban periphery in Bogota, which is called Soacha. Soacha is not part of Bogota, but is conurbated with Bogota. And it's also more than 1 million people living there. Mainly working class people. Most of the barrios in Soacha are informal in their origins, are self-construction barrios, and is community organizing that has made the barrios and the live in the barrios possible. So that's part of what I want to study, that's part of what I do, and that's part of the roots of my interests. During my BA, I studied urban grassroots militancies of the Movimiento 19 de Abril. The Movimiento 19 de Abril, M19, was a guerrilla movement in Colombia that was active from 1974 to 1990, when they decided to be part of a big peace agreement and to become like a recognized legal formal political party in Colombia after the made of a new national constitution. I studied how in the barrios, people who were in the barrios were part of this movement, and how the movement inserted in the barrios, but also how these people at the local level had political relationships with different actors. I agree with Jennifer when she was saying that at the local level, you can see or the local level had a direct relationship with what happens at the big global levels in terms of politics, in terms of transformations. I have experience in teaching in the university. I was a teacher in a class about class relationships. I am very interested in class inequalities, how class works, how class is experienced in our bodies, in our experiences, in our histories. I have been researcher, and as a result of my BA thesis, I had the chance of publishing a book, which is titled La Gente del Sancocho Nacional, and it's about these experiences of militancy of these grassroots organizations at the barrio level related with the Movimiento 19 de Abril, and I hope this book can contribute to a long task that we have in Colombia, and is to create and achieve a stable, peaceful society, and to close finally the long cycles of violence that we have had historically. I have experience as community organizer. I have been part of the feminist movement since the 2019 approximately. In Soacha, we, with other women, created the Asamblea Popular de Mujeres de Soacha, which was a feminist organization. Our goal was to join with another woman in the territory and to make feminism in a barrio basis, basically, to make feminism in the local basis, to reach out our neighbors, the girls, the women in our neighbors, to talk to them about feminism, why feminism is relevant for women in the urban peripheries in Bogota. So that has to do with what I do, what I study in my PhD. I'm in the second year in the PhD program in history, and I study urban social movements in Colombia in the 20th century, women as political actors in the 20th century, and issues of energy and modernization. And that's something that I want to share with you today. So this is part of my MA paper. I will be defending it probably in 2 weeks or so. And it's titled Amas de Casa's Revolves, Local Political Responses in Colombia to the Global Oil Crisis of 1972 and until 1989. In 1973, there was a big oil crisis related with the Yom Kippur War and changes in the geopolitics of oil production. And this implied a crisis of oil in Colombia, given to particularities of the place of Colombia in producing oil. But this generated a huge wave of mobilization at the local levels, especially from the urban peripheries of big cities as Bogota. So I found the evidences of this mobilization for energy justice because in the barrios, in the urban peripheries in Bogota, most of the people used as the main energy source oil, because electric energy was very, very expensive. And with the crisis, most of these barrios had the impossibility of having access to affordable energy sources. So I found the evidences of these huge mobilizations while making archival research last summer, and decided to make this MA paper about this case because I found that were women the main actors in these mobilizations. And when you see the newspapers and all the sources that exist about this case, they're talking about the Amas de Casa revolves. Like the Amas de Casa are taking the gas stations, are taking the streets. The Amas de Casa are furiously talking to the energy company. So I started to wonder why the Amas de Casa, why the women, and why women seem to have this leading role at the local level to mobilize political responses to global crisis. So I have found that Colombia is not the only case in which Amas de Casa at the local barrio level, especially women with impoverished women in the urban peripheries, were the ones who were mobilizing political responses. And this is related with the way in which the crisis, the economic crisis, are lived and impact the domestic spheres in the urban poor populations. And the role of the Amas de Casa is to mobilize, to make this issue that is understood as domestic, as in fact a political issue. It's not just a domestic, but it's a political issue. And it seems to be a characteristic of Latin America that women have had the possibility of collectivizing issues that seems to be individual and domestic, which is all of things that happens in the domestic sphere. Cooking, taking care of children, taking care of the elders, where you get water for drinking. These are issues that seems to be very individual, very part of the domestic sphere, but in Latin America, they have become collective issues and issues to be discussed in the public sphere. And that has been mainly an action and a consequence of the political organization of women since the 1970s decades. And in doing so, women have had helped to redefine notions of citizenship, of rights, and of democracy, making even their own demands of what democracy means, what citizenship means, what human rights means. And this is a case of that. So I think this is connected with the Latin American community and with Latinx community in general, because it helps us to understand the particularities that women's grassroots participation in social movements in Latin America have had, in contrast with women, with women movements, and in general with social movements in other parts of the other regions of the world. This research also helps us to historicize the women's activisms. Sometimes we think that feminism is a matter of today and is a phenomenon of today, of the 21st century. But in fact, women have leading political roles all the way through human history, and this is a try of showing what this long history of women's activism has been. This allows to acknowledge the critical political role that have this considered domestic sphere, and how these amas de casa, far from being just amas de casa, have been leading political actors, and to address the multiple and sometimes contested definitions of democracy and citizenship that we have had in Latin America. We don't have just one definition of citizenship or of democracy, but we have had very multiple, diverse, multivocal definitions of democracy according to the different actors that we have. And from the local peripheries, from the urban peripheries, we have had different notions of democracy. And I totally agree with Jennifer. These have an impact in how democracy has been changed, has been adjusted, and has been contested through the years. And finally, I think this is a history for inspiration and organizing. I think that studying how people have joined together in the past and have decided that they are able to change the world is an inspiration for us to join together and think how we can change the world too. So at the end, it's also a source for inspiration and organization. And that's it. Thank you so much. Vivan los barrios. Yes, Jen. So I think finally we have time for some questions. So, and yeah, first of all, yay, congratulations to everyone here. Has been amazing to have this transdisciplinary conversation. So the floor is open for questions, interventions, wherever you want. Please feel free to activate your microphone or just text the intervention in the chat.
I think I'm the only one with raising his hand, so I'm just gonna jump in, if you don't mind. First of all, I just want to congratulate all of you for your fantastic work and highlight that this event has been like such an amazing opportunity to get to know you and your work better. So I'm really happy for that. I think like we put like this together mostly kind of like last minute, and it's so incredible to like get to know you kind of like in a deeper sort of like professional level, because we like engage in like many like activities where we're trying to obviously like to like build community, like engage ourselves in some kind of like that life, like grad student life besides the or like outside the classroom. But like, I think like these spaces are like super necessary to like find also like ways of like solidarity, kind of like connections, like networking, because I think like I can see how like many of your projects kind of like directly dialogue with my research. So I think it would be amazing to like extend this sort of like participation to like putting like panels together and like conferences out there, trying to like look for more kind of like collaborative work. And yeah, just congratulations to all of you.
Thank you, Oscar. Yes, I totally agree. I think it's wonderful to have this chance of getting to know our different research and to get to know better not just who we are, but also what do we do in our professional activist and research scholar careers. That would be amazing to have more spaces to do this and maybe to collaborate with each other, because I think there are connections between our topics. Guy, go ahead.
Thank you. I totally agree with Oscar, and I'm super glad, like very happy to hear like about the research of everyone. I would like to pose a question to Jennifer, if you don't mind, Jenny. Could you speak a little bit more? Like, I'm very interested in your research project. I think there's like many things to relate like to my research. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit more in terms of, especially like this one article that you wrote already in terms of methodology, because you come from this place. So do you bring a lot of your memory and it's all in your body? Like you have the embodied knowledge to write about it. But I also wondered if you did like one specific field research in order to write something or to research one specific topic, as you did in Belo Horizonte in Brazil, or if you're bringing your identity and your lived experience in a more like long-term viewpoint or experience.
Gui, thank you so much for the question. Really, I really appreciate. I think it's both because I had the great opportunity to access higher education, well, to learn. When I studied political science, I just learned about methodology and research, and by doing the master degree, also going through qualitative research. So yeah, I have that part of the methodological aspect in terms of the research. I always try to think about questions. If we do like qualitative, right? But at the same time, it is important for me to embrace my local history. And by embracing this, it means it means for me, at least, that I'm not going to the field as just an observer, or I'm not just an observant participant. I'm part of that specific place. Maybe that can be tricky in terms of how you can separate, how could you be an insider research? And at least for me, I'm learning there is the community-based participatory research in which in all the stages that you develop this process of research, you not just include, but people, community members, are also co-researchers in that way. So you are not including, you are working with them to like shape those questions, to, like in this case for the article, there was a specific place and a specific opportunity to talk about a specific situation about their life and about how they enact an ecological citizenship. So I try to walk with them in the questions, and I try to go back. Like I have these, and as you said, like now I'm thinking about podcasts, or I'm thinking about how the dissemination of what I did, it's also understandable in a way for them, how they also can embrace this. Like that's why the community organizing, it's so important, because you can put everything together. So thank you so much for the question.
Pao, go ahead.
Yeah, so it has been great, like, to know about your research, about your work and the community. Yeah, it has been great to see another perspective of what I'm working on, because I'm coming from a more like a scientific background. I'm more like quantitative. I mean, I am doing qualitative research also, but it's very focused on quantitative and like doing clinical studies and that kind of stuff. So my question is also for Jennifer and for Iris, that you are working, I mean, that you are being part of this community of San Juan de Lurigancho and Soacha. So I'm wondering like how that can affect your research, and if you have to think about the bias, about being more objective and like not having those feelings for your community. So in your area, you have to separate those kind of things, or how you are working to, yeah, like in your research, how you are working to overcoming this bias that you may have.
You want to go, Jen, or me? Okay. In history, in fact, the matter of objectivity and biases and truth has been longly discussed, because history is inherently politics. I mean, history have direct political uses. We have different approaches to objectivity. Some historians tend to be more like positivists in their approach to objectivity and say like, yeah, you need to be objective with your approach to the sources. But recently, I mean, since the 70s and the 80s, not like 40 years ago, but there has been like a turn acknowledging that, especially when you do social sciences and humanities, including history, you always have a positionality in your work. You can't get rid of this. And the best way of addressing these biases you have is addressing this positionality, first of all. So acknowledging that yes, you are not like an external observer of a phenomena, but you are part of that phenomena you are observing. And you obviously have interest, you obviously have positions, you obviously have particular approaches to that phenomena. But at the same time, it doesn't imply that you are not able to see the shades and the multiple different perspectives of a same phenomena. So in my case, more than objectivity, I think it is related with first acknowledge my close relationship with what I am studying. So yes, I am into that topic because I have been part of a peripheral urban community, for example. I'm from a women organization. But at the same time, there are other things that distances me from this phenomena. For example, I am studying a phenomena in the past. In another barrio is completely different. And these move things in my body, in my interest, in my experience. But this is another world too. And a method in history to overcome my own perspective, it's to put it in conversation with different sources. So, for example, I read the way in which this movement of women in the urban peripheries were presented in the Colombian government, how they were presented in the press, in the public press of that time, how were they presented for the people in the barrios, and how all of these perspectives differ. And this helps me to have a broad comprehension of the phenomena, not just my perspective, but also the perspective of different actors that were part of this phenomena I am studying, but also I am related with. Jen, go ahead.
I will just say something quickly, and I'm gonna also ask a question for everyone. Just to say that I'm very sure that as a community organizer plus researcher, I'm trying to fight against stigmatization. That's my whole thing. So I'm a fighter. And in that way, I try, well, fighter is maybe, I don't know if it is the correct word, but I want to say that I would love to see the change through the small things that I'm trying to do. The best thing that I'm learning is to do research. So I would love to, well, Tania, I think, already left. I don't see Tania, but my question is for all of the other panelists. Well, Tania is not there, but Tania, Abby, Guy, and Pao. And how do you envision your own positionality in whatever part or stage of your research that you try to conduct? So for, yeah, I say already.
I'm going to say something that comes into my mind pretty quick, because positionality is also, we also have to always take intersection, like from which point of view are you understanding your positionality? And I'm saying this because I am a gay man and I'm talking about a gay situation, or thinking broadly as a queer situation in my hometown. So it's like my hometown, and well, I'm gay. I participate to the social relations, to this in this choreopolitics. At the same time, in Brazil, I am a white gay man. So there are some things that as a white gay man, I live, and this is my positionality, and I cannot speak like to or as a Black gay man, for example, because we have different living experiences. So what I mean to say is, I don't know, I think positionality is also kind of a thing that it's complex because it depends on how exactly you're looking or what exactly are you doing with it. Like, but first, to have responsibility, to have like ethics in the research, and I'm trying not to speak for others. I think this is something that I always keep in mind when I'm doing research or writing. I don't know if this was too vague.
I think for me, I'm very aware of my position as a mainlander Puerto Rican and a member of the diaspora, essentially. And my family history of coming from essentially forced migration from the island is very much informs why I care and why I focus a lot of my research, particularly on how the US resources that should be available to Puerto Ricans on the island are often not. And focus my research in that space. So I know that that influences where I'm at. And then I think I have learned that inequitable disaster recovery not only affects the Puerto Rican community, but it affects the people in the other territories of the US that are technically US citizens, but still as well do not have the full, we're like second class citizens, essentially. And as well as the communities that are lower income that have those heirs properties. Like the first time I ever heard of heirs property was through the disasters in Puerto Rico, because I knew family members who couldn't get any aid due to that they couldn't prove that they own this land. So I think for me that definitely, all of that informs why I got connected to disaster research, disaster services, and my pursuit for equitable practices at the federal level. There's a lot of work being done in every other level, but I know that my positionality as a student right now too also gives me opportunity to examine at a different level policy and how we can influence that.
Like, okay, that was my turn. So now I'm thinking that in my case, it came from my passion. Like since I was a kid, I have always had this passion about helping people, especially in medicine, then later on in rehabilitation. So I have always like wanted to be a doctor, and like because I was I have a lot of illness when I was a child, so I was always in the doctor, and I want to be the same when as an adult. And then during my undergrad, I didn't think really about making about this, like making research for helping people. I wasn't thinking about that. It was just, I'm just gonna work and like working with children, and that's it. I don't want to make an impact in my community. And then in my master, unfortunately, I was in Canada, so I wasn't thinking about the Latino community. because all of my work was for Canadian people and Canadian children, and I wasn't thinking about how can I transfer all of this knowledge and all of this like passion that I have right now to Colombia or to Latin America. It wasn't until my PhD when I applied for the Fulbright scholarship that I won, and I had to think what is going to be the impact of my PhD to Colombia, and I have never like thought about that. So I have this process of self-knowledge and like rediscovering my passion that I think I want to be part again of Latin America. I don't know of Colombia, but Latin America in general. And I think that with my PhD, I can reach a position that I am going to be an expert in the rehabilitation field and in assistive technology, and I can make an impact in Latin America. So that's my objective in the next like 5 years, 10 years, I don't know, after my PhD, to be able to, as I say, to be a leader, to be in a position that I can talk with different organizations, different disability communities to see if we can implement a change. But it wasn't until my PhD. Like before that, I wasn't thinking about that. I was like, I'm just gonna work. I'm gonna do a lot of money. I'm gonna work with children, and that's it. And I wasn't thinking about making an impact. So yeah, I think that because of Fulbright and because of the PhD that I am able to shift my focus and think about making this huge impact and have an action plan in the disability community.
Thank you, Pao. Someone else wants to have a space for commentaries, questions? Because if not, I have a final quick question for all of us. I read recently a book by Immanuel Wallerstein that makes a call for transdisciplinarity, or like transcend the boundaries of disciplines, because at the end, knowledge is not like these small boxes of separated disciplines, but there are lines of continuity from the different areas that we study. And I think this panel is an example of that. Besides our very different areas, our very different fields and topics, I see there are lines connecting our perspectives and our work. So I want that briefly each one of us can speak something that have learned about or have inspired your own work from this panel, from other works of this panel. Is understood the question? Who wants to start up?
I can start. I think my work is very high level at the federal level, but I understand the necessity and the impact of when a disaster happens, that you need those community organizers on the ground. You need the people they're the ones who are helping and making the connections. You need the people who can bring in resources, who can access and gather, like even helping to identify if Jennifer, if you know every single person in the village, it's who's missing, something as small scale as that to a higher impact of what the community needs actually are. And so it's incredibly important to build partnerships when you're coming in, especially as an outsider. I think also thinking about the incredible importance to the people who are disabled or the differently abled communities. Oftentimes in disasters, they are left out as well. And so it is incredibly important to be aware of technology as well that you shared, Paola, of what we can use to help that connection and to provide resources to. And I think that is a space for there to be access and maybe even expansion within FEMA resources to specifically include the disabled or differently abled community as well. So I'm just seeing the connections too of like how they're all influenced. And then also I have to say, Guy, the arts are how people express, and there are grants out there in particularly disaster services for supporting artists when they're coming from a disaster or experiencing a disaster, because it's therapy for the entire community.
Thank you, Abby.
Yeah, so I agree with Abby. Like, I think that this talk has like brought my mind, I don't know, like opened my mind. So I see the importance of involving the community, in this case, the disability community, since the beginning of the research project. Like being able to make them like co-researchers, and have this community-based participatory research, because in my field, usually it's the clinicians, the researchers go to the community and see, yes, we have this kind of intervention, and you're going to be participants, and you're going to be paid for doing this, and that's it. Like, we're never going to talk with you like anymore. So it's kind of a paternalist view, and I think that it's important to create this change in my field, in my area of research. That is important, like to create this project, this research project along with people with disabilities, because at the end, they're going to be the end users, they're going to be the ones who are benefit from the intervention that we're trying to implement. So I think it is important, like talk with them, have, I don't know, like focus groups, be immersed in the community, and yeah, so then can be like co-researchers, and that's gonna be like a huge plus in my field.
I was really inspired by the talk by Jennifer. I think she had to left already because she had a meeting, but I was really wondering how, like, there's always something, because usually I tend to differentiate a lot my research in theater, which is like pedagogical and creative, and now my research as a performance studies researcher, which is a very theoretical and very interdisciplinary by itself. But at all times I try to, how do I like create this bonding between these two areas? And maybe like education is one of the area that can concentrate all this, right? So I was really inspired by Jennifer and thinking about what she said about community-based participatory research. That made me think about performance ethnography, how the ethnographer can not only be there, but create something with the community. Because somehow, when it comes to very theoretical research, I'm always thinking, but what's the praxis of it? How do I turn this into a tool? And of course, the research itself can be very powerful. I do believe in scholarship, in the very deep and dense text. It's not that I don't like it. I do think it has its political relevance, but sometimes, and especially listening to Abby as well, like how is this related to the life of people that has been affected, like directly by any type of radical situation? What's the political and social role of the artist in this type of situation? So hopefully, I'm feeling like, because of today, I'm feeling like more inspired of, okay, this is my first stage of the research, but maybe, well, I still have at least 4 or 5 or 6 years ahead of my PhD. So how can I actually try to gather to reunite theory and practice in the next stages of my research? So thank you for the inspiration.
I can say something quickly, if it is possible. Like, thank you so much to everyone. It was really amazing to listen to your research and to find the connections. I think all of us, Tania is not here, but with Tania, we also shared a lot of stuff because we are from Peru. The themes about mobilization, the themes about like the territory or sense place,
to think about communities, and even having quantitative methods. For example, this is something that I lacked. Maybe Pao, through your research and maybe something that you learn and you have, I don't know, how in the future we can envision to work in collaboration with different people with different backgrounds as well. And yeah, I think that I'm really glad to listen to your research and activities as well. I didn't know all the stuff that Abby did regarding disaster, and also at the federal level, which is connected to the United States as well. So yeah, that was really amazing to be part of. And yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. And as for me, in terms of research and positionality, I think yeah, just try to have if we have the opportunity to work on our courses or in the space that we have in our courses towards something that we like, at least that is something that I did towards or through my PhD studies in education policy. I try to connect my local identity with a course to learn more about theory that also I lack from that, or to learn more about quantitative stuff or the community-based participatory research. How can I have examples from my community and try to use the framework that I'm learning here? So yeah, thank you so much. Great connections with everyone.
Yeah, I think the main idea of connecting, having the opportunity of get to know better all the research we do as graduate students, we have done it. We have done the goal of our panel. So thank you so much for the panel discussants today. To the participants of the discussion. Thank you so much to the organizers of Latinx Connect conference, to Victor, who's here, for like giving us this space to have this conversation. Victor is reminding us that there is the conference keynote with Dr. Nancy Lopez begins at 12:15. So we are very invited, and we have another panel with Lagos community also coming in the afternoon. Oscar left the link here in the chat. So thank you, everyone, and see you later.